The missed message. We'll be looking at John chapter 13, verses 1 through 35. But before going there, got a brief story. When I was in college, I was in marching band. And, I got to march in the Dust Bowl. And I call it the Dust Bowl, and I think everybody at that time called it the Dust Bowl because it was dry, it was dusty, and it was next to the water treatment plant. And for those of you that don't know, water treatment plant is code word for sewage. And every day we'd go out there for practice. We'd march up and down the field. Sometimes we'd do a competition, and the competition was Simon Says. And the director of band, he was Simon. And he'd stand up at the top of the tower, and he'd yell out orders. And either you got it right and got it right immediately, or you're out. And pretty consistently, I'd finish in the top 5. I never got to number 1, but I did good. And on one of those days when I was in the top 3 and me and the other person that did not win failed at the exact same time, at the end of practice that day, somebody came up to me and said, "Rich, I don't get it." It's like, what don't you get? Every day, from beginning to end of practice, you are out here and on fire. It doesn't matter that you never win this competition. It doesn't matter how many times he makes us do the exact same thing over and over and over again. You're ready to go. Half of us are flagging and dragging, and you're ready to do it one more time. How do you do it? I said, oh, that's easy. Every day before I come out here for practice, I get myself a really big thing of orange juice and a huge chocolate chip cookie. And I eat those really quickly, and I'm ready. And I said, no, by the way, as to why I'm fired up, I really want to be part of making music. I want to be part of what this is all about. I'm happy to be here. I can't believe you paid to be here and aren't fired up. We both had done the same thing. We spent the time on the field. We were both musicians. But doing the time, paying the price, didn't mean we were approaching it with the same understanding. Keep that thought in mind. Let's look at John chapter 13, beginning with verse 1. It reads, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." When it says his hour has come, we're not even talking days now. We're talking less than 24 hours, and Judas is going to betray him. He's going to be taken. They're going to beat him. He's going to be whipped. And he's going to be crucified. Think about that with what takes place next. Reading verses 3 through 5, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from the supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. I just said it was the last 24 hours. Last 24 hours, and it's going to go bad. Bad in a real, real ugly way. If it was your last 24 hours, is the thing you're going to be doing washing people's feet? Chapters 13 through 17 are a continuous dialogue and action kind of sequence. It's a constant flow of what was said and done. And in that constant flow, he's stopping to wash their feet. That's not an instant kind of thing. It takes time to wash the grime off of somebody's feet. And he doesn't just do that for one person. He does it for all 12. That's not the kind of thing you tend to think about when you think you've only got so long to live. There's something significant about what he's doing. Let's continue reading verses 12 through 17. So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down again, he said to them, "Do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, 'Well,' for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." And in every class, in every sermon I've heard, that's the answer. Straight up, the servant is not greater than the master. If I washed your feet, you need to be willing to do the same, go and do the same to each other. And it stops. But there's a catch. And the catch is the verse I didn't read. Verse 7. Jesus answered and said to him, "What I am doing, you do not understand now, but you will know after this." Okay, when Jesus goes to wash the feet, he gets all the way around to Peter, and Peter says, "Whoa, this is not happening. My dirty, stinky feet don't need to be washed by you." And Jesus, no, either I wash your feet or you have no part of me. And then Peter goes to the opposite extreme. "Okay, then wash my hands, wash my head." And Jesus like, no, you really don't get it. All that's dirty right now are your feet. That's what needs to be done. That's what needs to be dealt with. And yes, I'm emphasizing the word needs. But remember what I said with verse 7. You don't understand. And maybe he could have gone one step farther and said, you can't understand what I'm doing right now. And the reason I am taking the time to stop, not teach, but stop, go through the physical action of washing every one of your feet. Boy, that was a fun set of words. Wash all of your feet. Feet just keeps coming out as a weird plural. Taking the time to wash them. But they weren't going to understand it then. Oh, but he gives them the understanding. No, he doesn't. He gives them the answer they can accept at that time. But for that moment, think of where Peter's been recently. Peter's the man who expects Jesus to become the next King David. He's not sure how this is about to happen, but he knows this is the final time. It's his hour. Something's going to go down. It's going to be a big political upheaval, and he's going to rule. And it's not just Peter that's thinking that way. You've got the brothers, whose mom comes and says, let one of them rule at your right and one at your left when you come into power. Come into power? He's been feeding thousands. He's been healing the sick. He has raised the dead. Lazarus was just days ago. You want what kind of power? He's already shown the power of God. It's not a matter of coming into it yet. They are so missing it. So the best thing he can do is give them something extremely concrete that they can hold on to, chew over for a bit, but it's not until they're the ones walking in Jesus' shoes, Jesus' way, that they're going to get it. Just because they were with him 3+ years, with him every step of the way with the ministry, seeing all those miracles, didn't mean they got it any better than the person that asked me, Rich, how in the world do you do it? We did the same things. They did the same things. But that doesn't mean understanding. And you know, even after I told them how I did it, I don't think the person I told understood. Jesus is a better teacher than me. And when he says, you're not going to understand now, I take him at his word. Okay, so if this wasn't an understood passage, not by those disciples, where's the answer? To see the answer, we're going to go to Ephesians chapter 4. We're looking at verses 11 through 13, and we're going to look at it through two different translations. First, we're going to look at it through the New King James Version. It says, and he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. And to look at that passage in particular, I want to be looking at verse 12. And the translation I'm going to read now from is the New American Standard. For the equipping of the saints for the work of service to the building up of the body of Christ. New King James, ministry. New American Standard, service. When we think of the word ministry, the first thing that pops into everybody's mind most times is going to be minister. And what kind of work does a minister do? And there's a chuckle by the one other minister that's present right now. Oh boy, the minister does everything. But we tend to think ministerial type of service. We have a very select few things that we're thinking about when we're thinking about ministry. The word that's there in the Greek, diakonia, and maybe I pronounced that wrong and I apologize. The word means attendance. And it doesn't mean being present. It means attending to, as in attending to your master, meeting their needs, servicing them in all that they ask for. Ministering to one's needs, that is the concept, if you're looking at it from the New King James Version. Learning to minister, to serve. Let's think about this for a bit. Think about Jesus' ministry from the beginning all the way up to Calvary. Very first miracle he performs, turning the water into wine. From a ministerial perspective, what did that accomplish? Oh, well, he was showing the sanctity of marriage. He was showing how water would turn to wine, sort of like blood, and okay, that one's off in left field. There's a lot of things I've heard taught out of this passage, most of which are trying to blow something up that really isn't there. His mom saw the need, brought it to his attention. He said, it's not my hour yet, Mom. But he did what was needed. And because he did, people believed. They saw the sign, And because they saw him doing the miracle, tied with meeting a need, they believed. When he feeds thousands, it's not because the feeding is some great important thing in and of itself. Feeding the thousands was important because by feeding them, it enabled them to hear him better. When he took care of the ills of others, it made it possible for them to open their eyes, open their ears, and open their hearts to the truth that was undeniably before them. That up until that time, well, they'd heard something special about this guy. Let's go out and see the circus. And they'd go out. Wow, he's saying things differently. This is cool. Jesus didn't come for cool. Whoa. He met my need. Maybe there's something else I need to be paying attention to. And because they started to listen, they could then hear. Jesus, throughout the entirety of his mission, even when it's the woman at the well, touching the untouchable is meeting a need that so many people have today. And when he touched the untouchable, all came out to hear. We came because we believed her. But now that we've heard you, we really believe. And it all began with an act of service. An act of service that isn't ministerial in its nature. It's ministering to the heart that has a need, possibly so great that it's blocking the ears from hearing the truth that's being presented. Jesus was giving a concrete example that they weren't going to understand in the moment. Because tensions are high. They're back in Jerusalem. This is the place that wants to stone him. And yes, the apostles have been there with him when they wanted to stone him. They've been through some of this worst. They're not able to get at that moment the significance, the importance, the power of the simple act of serving. And there's two other strings I want to tie in with this. The first one, let's look at Matthew chapter 7, verses 9 through 12. Or what man is there among you who, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. And I'd like to also jump back to Matthew chapter 5, verse 46, where it reads, For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? I'd like to put a clarification on that acts of service. We're told by Jesus, doing good isn't the answer in and of itself. Because even the evil of the world knows enough to do good to their own. And if all we're doing is doing good to our own, if all we're doing is washing the feet of one another, how are we different from the world? When Jesus tells them, do this to one another, he's not talking about the disciples that are there right then. He's talking to the one another, the ones he loved from the beginning. And oh, by the way, it wasn't just them. He came because God so loved the world. Because he so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. How big was that love? How big was that one another? It was an all one another. Because by doing it to all, there is the hope that some will receive. The message Jesus was trying to convey that they wouldn't understand then was the message of service, was the message of service to all in love, because that was his example. And this even goes back into the Old Testament. If you look at Isaiah chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, put away the evil you're doing from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Rebuke the oppressor. Defend the fatherless. Plead for the widow. Learn to do good. Not the good that comes natural, loving those that love you. Learn to do the hard. Showing love, meeting needs for those that aren't acting very loving to begin with. Jesus didn't wait till they were followers to feed them. Jesus didn't wait till they committed to him to heal them. Jesus didn't wait till they confessed he was the Son of God to raise the widow's only son, to raise Lazarus. Jesus acted in love first. Jesus served first, so that by serving, eyes and ears and hearts would be open. The last passage that I would like to look at is from Matthew chapter 5 again, verse 16. And in Matthew 5:16 it says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." May see your good works and glorify the Father in heaven. He said it that way for a reason. He said it that way, and Paul says what he says in Ephesians for a reason. I'll be honest. Doing good is easy. Doing good and making sure it reflects back upon God instead of self, that takes equipping. It takes an understanding of how others see the act and an understanding of what additional communication needs to take place. And as we saw and see in John 13, when it can take place. This isn't an easy lesson because it's really easy to read John 13, the first part, and miss what they missed, and even miss that they missed it. It's hard to learn to serve in a way that reflects back and glorifies God. It takes time and it takes effort, but it makes the difference. They came, and even Jesus accuses them of this. They came to have their bellies filled. They came to see the signs, to be entertained. But through the acts of service that Christ did, that glorified God, they were able to pause, to see and hear and know, I need to listen. I need to change. And that's why on the day of Pentecost, thousands could respond. It wasn't because it was the most awesome sermon they'd ever heard. It's because 3+ years of service and teaching combined, where the service was directed to the glory of God, had come to fruition. And the church says, amen.